Random House Audio presents H.R.H. by Danielle Steel. Read for you by J.O. Sanders. Christianna stood at her bedroom window looking down at the hillside in the pouring rain. She was watching a large white dog soaking wet with matted hair digging excitedly in the mud. Every now and then he would look up at her and wag his tail and then return to digging again. He was the great Pyrenees her father had given her 8 years before. His name was Charles, and in many ways he was her best friend. She laughed as she watched him chase a rabbit that eluded him and promptly disappeared. It was the last of summer, and the weather was still warm. She had returned to Vaduz in June, after 4 years of college in Berkeley. Coming home had been something of a shock, and so far the best thing about her homecoming was Charles. Other than her cousins in England and Germany and acquaintances throughout Europe, her only friend was Charles. She led a sheltered and isolated life, and always had. It seemed unlikely she would see her Berkeley friends again. As she watched the dog disappear toward the stables, Christianna hurried out of her room, intent on going outside and following him. She grabbed her riding slicker and a pair of rubber boots she used to muck out her horse's stall and ran down the back stairs. She was grateful that no one noticed her, and a moment later she was outside sliding through the mud and running after the big white dog. She called his name, and in an instant he bounded up to her, nearly knocking her down. Together they ran side by side along the bridle path. It was too wet today to ride. After nearly an hour, slightly out of breath, Christianna stopped, the dog panting heavily beside her. She took a shortcut then, and half an hour later they were once again back where they began. It had been a wonderful outing for both mistress and dog, and each looked as disreputable and disheveled as the other. Christiana's long, almost white blonde hair was matted to her head, her face was wet, and even her eyelashes were stuck together. She never wore makeup unless she had to go out or was likely to be photographed, and she was wearing the jeans she had brought back from Berkeley. They were a souvenir of her lost life. She had loved every moment of her 4 years at UC Berkeley. She had fought hard to be allowed to go. Her brother had gone to Oxford, and her father had suggested the Sorbonne for her. Christianna had been adamant about going to college in the States, and her father had finally relented, though reluctantly. Going that far from home spelled freedom to her, and she had reveled in each day she was there. She had come home to face her responsibilities and do what was expected of her. To Christianna it felt like a heavy burden, lightened only by moments such as these, running through the woods with her dog. The rest of the time since coming home, she had felt as though she were in prison, serving a life sentence. There was no one she could have said that to, and doing so would have made her sound ungrateful for all she had. Her father was extremely kind to her. He had sensed more than seen her sadness since returning from the States. But there was nothing he could do about it. Christianna knew as well as he did that her childhood and the freedom she had enjoyed in California had come to an end. Charles looked up at his mistress questioningly as they reached the end of the bridle path, as though asking her if they really had to go back. "I know," Christianna said softly, patting him. "I don't want to either." She laughed as she looked at him, thinking how hard to believe that this muddy brown dog was really white. She was hoping to slip in the back door, but getting Charles into the house in his disreputable condition would be a greater challenge. He was too filthy to take upstairs, and she knew she would have to take him in through the kitchen. He was in desperate need of a bath after their muddy walk. She opened the kitchen door quietly, hoping to escape attention for as long as possible. But as soon as she opened it, the enormous muddy dog bounded past her, dashed into the middle of the room, and barked with excitement. So much for a quiet entrance. Christianna smiled ruefully and glanced apologetically at the familiar faces around her. The people who worked in her father's kitchen were always kind to her, and sometimes she wished that she could still sit among them, enjoying their company and the friendly atmosphere, as she had as a child. But those days were over for her as well. They no longer treated her as they had when she and her brother Friedrich were children. Friedrich was 10 years older than she, and was traveling in Asia for the next 6 months. Christianna had turned 23 that summer. Charles was still barking, and shaking the water off enthusiastically, had splattered nearly everyone around him with mud, as Christianna tried vainly to subdue him. "I'm so sorry," she said as Tilda the cook wiped her face with her apron, shook her head, and smiled good-naturedly at the young woman she had known since birth. She signaled quickly to a young man, who rushed to lead the dog away. "Would you like some lunch?" Tilda asked. "Your father's still in the dining room. He just finished his soup. I could send something up for you." Christianna hesitated and then nodded. She hadn't seen him all day, and she enjoyed the quiet moments they shared when he wasn't working and had a few minutes to himself, which was rare. The only reason she had willingly come home from Berkeley was for him. There had been no other choice, although she would have loved to go on to graduate school just so she could stay in the States. She didn't dare ask. She knew the answer would have been no. Her father wanted her at home. She knew she had to be doubly responsible because her brother wasn't at all. If Friedrich had been willing to shoulder his responsibilities, it would have lightened the burden on her. But there was no hope of that. She left her slicker hanging on a peg outside the kitchen and took off her boots. They were noticeably smaller than any other pair there. She had tiny feet and was so small she was almost a miniature. People said she looked like her mother, and somewhat like her father, who was as fair as she was, although both he and her brother were very tall, well over 6 feet. Christiana's mother had been as small as she was, and had died when Christianna was 5 and Friedrich was 15. Their father had never remarried. Christianna was the lady of the house, and was often her father's hostess now at important dinners or events. She bounded up the back stairs in jeans, sweater, and stocking feet. She arrived in the pantry slightly breathless, nodded at the people there, and slipped quietly into the dining room. Her father was sitting at the dining table alone, poring over a stack of papers, wearing his glasses with a serious look on his face. He didn't hear Christianna come in. He glanced up and smiled as she slipped silently into the chair beside him. He was obviously pleased to see his daughter. He always was. "What have you been up to, Cricky?" He had called her that since she was a little girl. He gently patted her head as she leaned over to kiss him, and he noticed her wet hair. "You've been out in the rain. Were you riding in this weather?" He worried about her, more than he did about Freddie. Christianna had always been so small and seemed so fragile to him. Ever since losing his wife to cancer 18 years before, he had treated their daughter like the priceless gift she had been to them when she was born. She looked so much like her mother. His late wife had been exactly the age Christianna was now when he married her. She was French, half Orléans and half Bourbon, the 2 royal families of France who had been the ruling monarchy before the French Revolution. Christianna was descended from royal families on all sides. Her father's ancestors were mostly German, with cousins in England. Her father's native tongue was German, though he and Christiana's mother had always spoken French, as she did with her children. Once she was gone, in her memory, Christiana's father had continued speaking to his children in French. It was still the language in which Christianna was most comfortable, and which she preferred, although she spoke German, Italian, Spanish, and English as well. Her English had improved immeasurably during her years in college in California, and she was totally fluent now. "I wasn't riding," she explained. "I just went for a run with the dog." As she said it, a footman set her soup down in front of her, in delicate 200-year-old gold-rimmed Limoges. "Are you very busy today, Papa?" she asked quietly as he nodded, and pushed his papers away with a sigh. "No more than usual. So many problems in the world, so many things that can't be solved. Human problems are so complicated these days. Nothing is simple anymore." Her father was well known for his humanitarian concerns. It was one of the many things she admired about him. He was a man worthy of respect, and was regarded with great affection by all who knew him. He was a man of compassion, integrity, and courage, and had set a powerful example for her and her brother to follow. Christianna learned from his example and listened to what he said. Freddie was far more self-indulgent, and paid no attention to his father's edicts, wisdom, or requests. Freddie's indifference to what was expected of him made her feel as though she had to attend to duties and uphold traditions for them both. She knew how disappointed her father was in his son.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?